Hey, what's up YouTube? King James here. If you've seen some of my recent videos on the Krig 6 and the Carve 2, I've had a couple of times where I've noticed that optics are doing things that I didn't know that they were going to do. So on the M16, I noticed that the Axial Arms had a lot more shake than it does on the Carve 2. And then I noticed that the Axial Arms versus the Susat Multizoom have a different recoil pattern. And recently, there's been a change to the optics on the Cold War guns. They never gave any kind of recoil reduction before. They always did on the Modern Warfare guns, but they never did on the Cold War guns. Well, now they do. So I wanted to have a look at a whole bunch of different really popular optics on a bunch of different popular guns and see if I could figure out what the difference is and which ones are working and how and why. So I've done a bunch of that and I've got it for you right now. So if you remember this footage from the Krig 6, I grabbed the Susat Multizoom and I shot it up the wall and I wanted to have a look at the recoil pattern. And then I went and grabbed the exact same gun, same build, just the Axial Arms 3X, and I shot it up the wall and I noticed that the recoil pattern was different. And this was the first time that I actually noticed that there was a difference in the recoil patterns. And what's interesting is I tested this earlier over here, and this is the Susat Multizoom and then the Axial Arms beside it. And I noticed it was shorter. So I did it again, and the Susat has this huge hook and where the Axial Arms doesn't, and it's shorter on the overall vertical. So it got me thinking that, you know, maybe the optics have changed. And I know that they put a change into the optics, but I didn't realize they impacted the recoil as much. And then I noticed that the visual recoil was different on the M16 versus the Carve 2 with the exact same optic. Let me show you that. So look at the shake on the optic, the visual shake. The M16 has a lot and the Carve 2 only has a little tiny bit. Here it is in slow-mo. You can see it bouncing big time on the M16, yet it's very still on the Carve 2. The exact same guns, very similar attachments, the exact same optic, the Axial Arms 3X. So something clearly is different on the different optics. So I jumped into Plunder with a Krig 6 and I decided I'm going to try out all of the recent popular optics. I'm going to shoot them off the wall and see if I can measure and tell what the difference is. And that was the iron sights. Here's the Hawksmoor, which is very similar to the Microflex LED. And I also tried the Visiontech 2X, which is a very popular scope. And the I think the next one is the Axial Arms 3X. Yeah, this is the Axial Arms 3X, a really popular optic. A lot of people use this one because it's clean and has a nice sight and it's big. And then this is the Susat Multizoom, also quite popular. I know a lot of guys use this, so I gave it a try as well. And it's cool because it's got a 2 and a 4X that you can switch. And then this is the Royal and Kross 4X. So it's sort of, you know, the longer between the Axial and the 2X and the Susat Multizoom. And what I got to was these. So here's the recoil patterns and I colored them in. And here's the iron sights. It goes up, it hooks a little bit to the left and then to the right and goes up. Hawksmoor was pretty well the same. And here's where you start to see some reduction. The Visiontech 2X, slightly less horizontal and not as tall vertically. And the Axial Arms is even straighter with none of that hook here at all and shorter. The Susat Multizoom has a little bit of the hook, but it's still pretty short. And the Royal and Kross has a really hard hook, but not quite as much vertical as the iron sights. So let me show you what I recorded. So check it out. Here's the iron sights, and I measured in centimeters because that's what my Photoshop is measured in. And then I measured the height on all of the other optics. And the Hawksmoor and the Visiontech gave a little bit of reduction, you know, 3 and 4 and 4 and 6%. But the Axial Arms, 9 and 13% in horizontal and vertical reduction. That's a huge reduction in overall recoil. And then the Susat Multizoom, 8 and 6, not bad. The Royal and Kross 1, and it had a huge increase in the horizontal because of that huge hook. So I wanted to look at a few other guns to see if it made a difference. So let's look at the M16. Now the M16 is a bit of an interesting case because it's burst. So I just bursted it on the wall in the exact same spot without touching the controller. I just pulled the trigger as fast as I could pull it and tried each one. So the exact same optics again, the iron sights, the Hawksmoor, the Visiontech 2X, the Axial Arms 3X, the Susat Multizoom, and the Royal and Kross 4. And then I went and had a look at all of them. And here's what I found. Iron sights was pretty tight horizontal and sort of our baseline for vertical. Now the Hawksmoor had less vertical, but definitely more horizontal. The Visiontech was about the same height horizontally, or maybe a little less, but more horizontally, a little less vertically. The Axial Arms, look at that. It's really tight, really short, and really thin. The Susat Multizoom, not a whole lot taller and a tiny bit wider. And then the Royal Royal and Kross also very tight. So let's look at the actual measured difference. So here's the M16, and I got to the base on it here, and the Hawksmoor -15, but a little bit more horizontal. The Visiontech, it was just more on both. Now the Axial Arms was the only one that reduced on both counts. So 14% on vertical and 7% horizontal. And you could really see when we were looking at that overall on the wall, it definitely had a reduction. The Susat Multizoom was about the same, but definitely a little fatter. And the Royal Kross was less vertically and a tiny bit more horizontally. So again, the Axial Arms really reduces the overall recoil on this gun. So I looked at the MAC-10, which is sort of an interesting case because you don't really use a scope on the MAC-10, but the Axial Arms, again, look at the reduction in vertical and horizontal. It was huge, a huge reduction. The Susat Multizoom, a little bit vertical, but it added horizontal. So one canceled the other one out. And the Hawksmoor was both not much on the vertical, but quite a bit horizontally. And that's because the MAC-10 has a really wide horizontal. Let me show you real quick. So here's the MAC-10 just shooting up the wall. And have a look at the horizontal spread on it. I don't know if you can see it here. I'll probably have to fast forward it. Let me go, where's the Axial Arms? Now, you would never use an Axial Arms 3X on a MAC-10, but it definitely has a smaller line. Let me get to the end here. Here's the horizontal. See how far they're spread apart on the MAC-10? Look at the Axial Arms. It really straightens it out. It's definitely shorter because it only goes up a little bit in the shade line, and the line itself is very like straight compared to the bullets all over side by side. So for all of these guns, the AR, the tactical rifle, and an SMG, the Axial Arms was the best. Now, on the SMGs, you're never going to use that, but the Hawksmoor and the Microflex LED you might use, and you're definitely getting some reduction in horizontal and vertical. So if you like to run a scope on a SMG, it's actually helping you, and it's not a bad choice. And if you're running some other attachments to get less horizontal vertical recoil, well, you can run a scope and get both and maybe save an attachment. Let's look at the Stoner though. The Stoner is a bit of an interesting case. So the thing about the Stoner is it's got so much ammo and so much recoil, it actually went all the way up the wall and ended up shooting over it. So I had to figure out a new way of testing the vertical recoil. And all of the optics seem to have a pretty straight horizontal, like it really didn't go left and right, but they all shot pretty high off the top. The only one that really didn't shoot that high off the top was that one did, the Axial Arms, again, right? You can see it'll go all the way up, and I think only a couple of the bullets went off the end, just there. Yeah, just a few went off. So let's look at the overall pattern. So one thing I noticed about the pattern is they're all just pretty straight. There's not a whole lot horizontal to talk about because they go up, but some of them move around a little bit, but they're all just straight lines. So I had to figure out another way to measure this. So here's the Stoner here, and I just looked at how many bullets flew over the top of the house or the building. And then I looked at the size of the mag and figured out how many hit and came up with a hit percentage that hit the house. So the less vertical recoil, the more bullets are going to hit the wall and not spray over the top. And the base was the iron sight. So 72% of the bullets from the magazine hit the building, and only a few of them went over the top. And then the Hawksmoor had a 9% reduction. The Visiontech is a 15% reduction. The Axial Arms, 22% vertical reduction. The Susat Multizoom actually had more. It was a 4% increase, and the Royal and Kross a 17% reduction. I don't think the horizontal really matters. That was just sort of it walking a little bit overall, but they were all pretty straight, so don't worry about that. So again, the Royal and Kross 4 or the Axial Arms or even the Visiontech 2X is a pretty good choice. So I wanted to look at a gun that has a ton of recoil, the AK-47. It's got a lot of recoil for an AR, and see how it looks. So I put all the guns side by side, and I started the ADS at exactly the same time on the same frame in every gun. And what's interesting is it looks like some of the optics are going to come up first, especially the Visiontech 2X, but they don't actually. The iron sights and the Hawksmoor both end at the exact same time, and then I measured each optic until it sort of stopped growing. And the Visiontech was next, and then the Axial Arms 3X, and then actually the Royal and Kross 4X, and the slowest was actually the Susat Multizoom. And I measured them all, and let me show you the results. So up here, these are the ADS times, and the iron sights and the Hawksmoor both came in at 283 milliseconds. The Visiontech 2X was the least amount of ADS, so 316, 11% more. And then the Axial Arms was next at 400 and a 40% increase, and the Royal and Kross 463 at a 65, and the Susat Multizoom was 500 milliseconds, which is 76% worse than the iron sights. So really a huge penalty on that one. The best, really, if you want a decent scope with some zoom, but not taking too much of an ADS penalty, is really the Visiontech 2X. So when I put them all across here and I have a look at them, what I found was looking at the average. The overall average, the Axial Arms has the most amount of vertical and horizontal recoil reduction. The Hawksmoor and Visiontech didn't do too much. So I decided to look at it with removing the outliers. And what removing the outliers means is this is removing the highest and the lowest on any given set of data. So I'm going to take this one here because it's a huge outlier in the highest, and this one here is a huge negative. So I pulled that out and I just look at the average of all of them minus those two that are really high. And that made the actual outliers removed. The overall average was 7 and 5% for these two, 13, almost exactly the same in the Axial Arms, and pretty well the same. The Royal Kross and Susat had a little bit of an increase. And for the ADS, well, the Visiontech 2X had the least amount of ADS penalty for a scope, not considering the Hawksmoor because it's almost like iron sights. It just is a little easier to look at. So if you like running an optic on your SMG, the Hawksmoor or the Microflex LED are good. If you want some recoil reduction with not too much of an ADS penalty, the Visiontech, the Axial Arms, I think is the biggest winner. It's got the huge amount of recoil reduction, but the least amount of overall penalty for a larger zoom scope. The Susat Multizoom didn't do much at all for the overall reduction and had a huge ADS penalty. And the Royal Kross, I don't think anybody really uses this all that much, but you know, it has an increase and a huge increase on ADS penalty. So what's the final word? Well, if you're running an SMG, iron sights are the best. If you like to use recoil reduction, the Hawksmoor or the Microflex LED may be a good choice because it actually gives you some recoil reduction. For the ARs and the tactical rifles, the Visiontech 2X or the Axial Arms 3X. Pretty good recoil reduction on both, more with the Axial Arms, and less ADS penalty on the Visiontech 2X than you get on the Axial Arms 3X. Although usually you're running this as your secondary and the ADS penalty doesn't matter all that much. On the Stoner, I would probably be running the Axial Arms. It just had the most. The Royal and Kross was also pretty good. And overall, I found that, you know, the Axial Arms, I think is probably the best optic for almost all cases, unless you're going to be using an SMG. Anyways, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And as always, if you don't see me in Warzone, if you don't see me in multiplayer, it's only a matter of time, baby. King James out.